All right. You are all welcome once again to today's session. So today will be beginning of our series or learning on Django. So today being our first episode, so we'll be starting by reviewing what Django is as a web framework. So it's a common place to have heard of the web framework being attached to Django, and you might have asked countlessly, trying to understand or to comprehend the connection or affiliation between them. So when we say Django as a web framework, so how do we mean, or what do we mean specifically? So it is just basically when we say a framework, so a framework is just like a pre-built structure. So again, it is just basically a pre-built structure. So when we say something is pre-built, so we have some expectation from it. So it's like a template, right? Like a prototype. So not really a prototype. So you can say a template or an architecture. So that should give us some functionalities. So amongst those functionalities are tools, right? So it should be able to provide some pre-built tools for us to reuse, right? That is one. So secondly, there should also be some structured rules or predefined rules that we can also use, existing rules that we can just like build upon, right? So it's also expected when we call something a framework. So as I have also mentioned earlier, so it should also be somewhat like an architecture, right? So now, how is this connected to Python, or how is it connected to Django? So now, in a case of Django, as our own interests are concerned, so we can say to build software faster, right? And correctly without starting from the scratch. So there are some tools and resources that has been provided by Django as a web framework, right? So as developers, as Python programmers, as Python engineers, so all these are not expected of us to reinvent all this wheel. So all this by default has been pre-built. So we can just leverage on these existing tools and resources to make our software development faster and what correct. So without having to repeat most of these things that are already in what in place, right? So now I would like to give us an analogy. So, and I like using this example as a citation. So imagine you are building a house, right? So you have two options to build a house. So, and the option A is you could start by building or making your brick, right? So you mix cement, so you mix it with sand, you add your water, so you go to fetch the wood you will be using for roofing and the likes, right? So you make provision for all these fundamentals you need to start what structuring your house, right? So now that is option A. Then option B is you have someone already with like a structure, right? With a reusable component that you could just build on. So all you just need to just focus on is just like, okay, fine. How do I want this house aesthetic to be? How do I want the design, right? Do I want it to be somewhat a 3D design, or do I want to use a type A design? Do I want to use type B design? That should be your concern at that instance, getting or having access to what? To the fundamentals, to the architecture of a house what building. So you would all agree with me that with this in place, it is needless to start reinventing most rules. Now, let's connect this to Django. In our own case, right, as Python developers, right, so it is built on an idea of a rapid development so that we can go from product quality and also building like a secured program, right? So instead of manually handle most of features or functionalities you would need in a what in a web development. So such as handling database ourselves, file handling, or admin dashboard, or a security, or as well as URL routing, right? So with Django in place, so all these are managed for us. So you just need to just build on them. You just need to just like give it more customization. Okay, right? This is how I want you to route this. Like giving it instruction, route this to this, connect this with this. Okay, give this logic. Okay, fine. In terms of database handling, right? So when Python is in place, we don't need to worry much about building our database schema, our table schema. So all we can do is to leverage or to optimize the existing ORM. So the object relational mapping that Django has what made provision for, right? So this, amongst others, are what makes what Django like a very robust web framework. So why is it now connected with Python? So it's connected with Python because it's a Python based framework, because it is also built with Python. So Django was also developed with Python and allows you to also write in what in Python. So it's also a higher level what language written in what Python. So now let's have a quick review of um, what Django can do for us. So we would be checking some basic features, right? So and be connecting the dots to what we would be doing with Django as a framework and without Django as a framework. So let's say, for example, so without Django, let's say we are building a program. So while we want to build um, authentication framework, right? So like our user login, our user sign in, and the likes, how they sign up and the likes. So you need to build all this from scratch. You need to what? You need to build all of this from scratch. But with Python, oh sorry, but with Django, so all these are already what? They are pre-built. So you just leverage on it. You just what? You just optimize it. You just what? You just give it more instruction. Okay, fine. This is what I want you to do. This is what I don't want you to do. So that is one. So secondly, we also have advantage of what? Database handling. Django has what? It has. We don't need to write SQL or MySQL as in our own interest manually, right? You don't need to write all this manually. So it has like an ORM, so which I have mentioned um just not quite long. So it handles this for us. So we are going to also be checking this extensively in one of our in one of our sessions on Django, right? So another thing is also file handling. So and also to cap it all, are you trying to say something? You said, hello, am I audible?
Go ahead, we can hear you.
Okay, so to cap it all, so it also has what we know as what a URL routing. So URL routing is just basically one of the core feature of Django we will be reviewing today. So because basically you'll be reviewing um the features or the structure of Django. So Django has this MTV structure. So what MTV does is, so they are like the architecture of Django, right? So what I mean by architecture of Django is what Django is doing primarily for us as a web framework, so that we can leverage on. So one of them is model. So this model is connected to data structure. So this is how it's help us to handle anything data related program we want to write in the course of our building our words our software or building our web application. So anytime you hear model, so amongst the MTV, so model just simply what signifies or translates into what logical data structure management by Django. So also we also have what we know as what templates. So templates is just basically like a user interface, right? So what user can see. So and this is where we can have some programs. Some programs really, who is that? So this is where we can have some programs relating um to what user can see, like a user interface. So like HTML program and the likes, right? So this is where we can have that. So on that template, we'd also be reviewing that in one of our sessions. So then we also have what we know as view, right? So view is this is where we can write Python logical program. Okay, we have something in the chat. Okay. So we also have what view. Maruf, please, if you can hear me, you would really appreciate if you can mute your mic, please. So you are getting some distraction from your end. So you really appreciate if you can mute your mic. So now for this view, so this view is like responsible for running Python logics. So that is one. The other thing it can also do is it is also responsible for handling HTTP requests and what response. So what this HTTP request and response is, we are going to be having a hands-on practice on it in our session today. So today, basically, we will be also be checking, in addition to other team or other session overview for today. So we'll also be checking how to understanding and becoming familiar with URL mapping, right? With URL routing and mapping in what? In Django. So also, would also be understanding how to use the view property or components of what? The MTV, right? So these are basically what will be what checking in today's session. So having said all this, right? So to recap, we should understand that Django is just like it's observing, or it's observing the normal notion or convention which Python also respects a lot, which is what? DRY. So you don't need to repeat yourself. So if I can give you an opportunity of reusable code, right? So if I can give you a clean structure, so if I can give you a fast development, or I can give you a program with less bugs, yeah. So, and also, it's also important to mention that the security architecture of Django is also very um, useful for Python developers. So, because there are some common security loopholes, right, that Django would also undo. So, such as SQL injection, authentication issue, and the likes. So, all this would be what handled by Django. And also, it also gives us like a pre-built admin interface, which should also be seen in a moment, right? So now, having said all this, so before we begin, I would like to give us like a hint, right, of what you will be delving into when we start our HTTP routing, right? So what HTTP routing would do, because it is very important that we have a comprehension of this. So before going deep, right? So what HTTP routing would do is, if for instance, right, a user visits a page, so we would be doing that practically. I just want to give us an overview. So if a user visits a page, like let's say for example, HTTP // at domain.com. So how does the HTTP handle this request? Where is it routed to? Who is responsible for this routing, right? So who takes it from who? So all of this, you would understand them, how they work in the back end today, right? So now, having said all this, so we are going to start practically in a what? In a sec. So now I would be opening my VS Code now so that we can have some hands-on practice. So here, right? So one of the other requirements we need to use Django is to first what? Install Django, right? So before we can start interacting with Django, right? So the first thing we need to do is to install Django. So now, what if you're unsure if Django is installed or not on your system? So what if you're unsure? So first thing you want to check is to check if you have Django installed or otherwise. So then how do you check? So I will be sharing two approaches with us, how we can check and confirm if we have Django installed or not. So the first one is to use the pip list, the PIP list. So with PIP list, so this will give us a list of most of the softwares we have installed in our what, in our local machine or in our Python environment per se, right? So in our Python environment, so if we see here, so I have some other packages installed, so which also includes Django, right? So what if you are not aware of this PIP list, how else can you also check if Django is installed on your local machine or otherwise? So another method you can use is to use this Python, right? Dash m, right? Then you say Django dash dash version, right? So if we also run this, right? So as you can see, it returned a version of what? Who is this? So um so as you can see, right? So it also returned the version of the Django we have installed, right, for us. So this also what allows us to confirm the version of Django installed on our what local machine. So what if you ran all of this and you didn't get any output indicating Django being installed on your what local machine? So what you just need to do, it's not even difficult at all. So just run pip, right, install. So, and then before you install the Django, right? So you would want to have an assumption that you are building a production project, right? A project will be publishing. So, and if you want to do that, you want to handle it professionally. So you don't just want to build it without structure. So you want to have a structure. So what I mean by structure is you want to have like a directory, like a root directory, where you would now add subdirectories and other files inside, right? So as in my case, I have created one. So I named this Django tutorial, right? So you can call it anything. So and I have seeded into or inside that directory now, right? So inside that directory is where I want to then install my Django. There are two options here. So one of the options is to use a virtual environment, right? Because while this virtual environment is encouraged, is one of the reasons is because so that in a case whereby you have other Django projects that you've already built with like an obsolete or a later version, right? So that you don't have a conflict with them while also working on newer version projects on Django. So you want to build like a virtual environment that would like just create like a room for each project, right? So it is just like a recommendation. It is not really mandatory, right? So if you want to do that, so all you just need to do is just to run the Python dash m venv, right? Then you give the virtual environment a name. So that will just create like a virtual environment for you. Then you can begin your project inside the virtual environment. But we wouldn't be doing that since this is a case of just what a tutorial or a practice, right? So now let's assume we've created a project directory. So inside this project directory, I want to install Django. So if you have not installed Django or if you are still having some issue installing Django, so all you just need to do is just to what type pip install what Django, right? So when we run this, so it takes just few minutes, then it have it what installed. So as you have seen it here, so this is because it is short because I already have it installed. So, but if it was a name installation, it would just be like few more lines to what we have here, right? So as you can see, we already have requirements already satisfied. So which means, or which confirms that I have installed Django, right? So we are good to go. So that is one. So another thing is now we want to start working with Django, right? So how do we work with Django? So another requisites you also want to consider while working with Django is also confirming that you have Python installed, right? So you also want to confirm you have Python installed. So you can also check that by running this command, right? So to be sure you have Python installed, because it's a requisite for you to use what Django. So now now we can believe, right, or conclude that we have met this basic requirement. So we now want to start working on a project. So to now start working on a project, the first thing you want to do is you want to create your project directory. You want to create your what? Your project directory. So this project directory will be like a root directory, right? Or a global directory, right? So it is inside this global directory, you would be having subdirectories. So one of these important subdirectories is what the app project you would also be checking in the course of this session, right? So now, it's important I mention and I stress now that many a time, most people confuse this app directory with the project directory. So now, let me clarify that very quickly. So project directory is just simply like a broad directory, like a root directory, right? So which would house other features or other functionalities that that project can do inside of it. So it's just like having a very big house, right? So in that house, so we can then have rooms. So with each room having a specific thing we want that room to do, or we use that room for, right? So it is the same thing as how a project is structured in Django. So when we have a global project, right? So inside that global project, we'll be having other subdirectories and other files. So all these files, we would also be appreciating and understanding them one after the other. So that all of this can make sense. So now, I want to believe we have understanding of what this project is essentially, so we can proceed and create the project. So to create a project file in Django, it's not really far-fetched, right? So, but before we create, so I want us to introduce us to one of the first command you would want to run while learning Django at first. So, and which is what? Django-admin. So when you run this command, so it gives you a list of all subcommands of Django. So what does this mean? So it means that if you want to do other things using Django command, then you can connect, or you can run them together depending on what you are trying to do, depending on what you are querying, right? So now in our case, if you check this list, so we have the likes of check, compile messages, DB shell, and a host of others. But for our own case, we want to start a project, right? So, and for starting a project, we would be more concerned with finding a sub command, which is what start project. Now I have seen start project. So how do I use it to create my root directory that I will be starting my project on? So you just need to do the same thing by saying Django, right? Admin. Then you type start, right? Start what? Project. Then the project name. So after the start project, the next thing is what? The project name. So in my case, I want to call this my project. You can call it anything, right? But I want to call it my project. So I will just say my what? My project. So then I will hit enter. So can you see now? So when I hit enter, so then let me check. Okay, let me check where I am currently. So I have seen my project created what for me. Okay, so I'm curious. What does this file contain, right? So what does it contain? I want to know. So then I can just simply what cd into this my project I just created, right? So let me cd into it, then let me list. So can you see? So now when I cd into my project directory that I created, so if you see there, I have two what sub directories. The first one is manage.py. So I would explain what that is in a moment. Then we also have my projects, right? My project. So this my project is just like a mirror of what we created earlier. So now let's see the inside my project and have an idea of what it contains. So we would say, well, see the inside my project. So then let's list. So if you see here, so we have some files here, right? So you might be confused or surprised. I just created, unlike the usual directory creation, right? That you just say mkdir and a project or a directory name, right? So you by default, it creates an empty directory. But in this case, I have some files created together with what the project file I created that I named my project. So what are these files? So these are the files, right? So if you remember, in the course of introduction of this course, right, or this session, so I said that Django has some pre-built functionalities, right? Some tools that can help us to build web development very fast and secure. So one of those pre-built features or tools are what we are saying now. When I cd inside my project directory. So one of them is the _ init __ .py. So I want to believe we are all familiar with what this file is or what it does, right? So as a recap, right? So what this _ is just to tell Python that this this is a what, a Python package. So don't forget, so like if you have several modules, right? So if you are working on a big project, right? So you want to have this file amongst your other files, right? Just to signal or to tell Python that, okay, fine, consider this directory, right, as a what? As a Python package. So that is what that _ init is. So if we check what we have inside, so you would see that it should be an empty file. So I'll check what we have inside. Can you see? So we don't really have anything inside. So it's an empty file. So what it's doing there is just to let Python know that this is what a Python package. So now, next to init is what we have ASCII, or as it is also referred to as asgi.py, right? So this asgi.py and wsgi.py. So they are just basically how Python web application and the web server communicates, right? So now to give more context to this is, let's say for instance, right, you publish this, you complete this project, right? You now publish it. So these two files would be responsible for building connection between everything you programmed there and the web server where this project will be hosted. So it builds that connection. Okay, yeah, someone is raising his hand. Yeah, you
Yes,
can
I have a
unmute and speak,
question.
please.
Yes, I have a
Okay.
question. Now you are viewing this prompts with your terminal. I don't know. Is it that this is the only way we can view? Because if I'm trying to view, I use Visual Studio to view all these files that you're talking, all these files inside each other you're talking about.
No. It's not the only way. You can also use that method. So you can use VS Code, right? So it's basically the same thing. So you can still use VS Code. So it's just normal, all these things are just normal file that we are familiar with as normal file that we create. An example .py, abc.py, xyz.py. So they are just basically a file, right, containing some words programs. But fundamentally, they are no more, they are not different from file we are familiar with. So in essence, you can as well check it in your VS Code. like this, right? So in your VS Code, so let me say, for instance, so in your VS Code, it's something you can just create as what I have here. Can you see? So it's
All
something you
right.
can create and view here. Yeah, yeah. So it's just basically the same thing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, just like it's just individual's preference. So okay, so I was explaining or giving an overview on the ASCII and WSGI file, right? So that is just what they do basically. So because we would be doing like a test, we would like be building a test project that will be hosting, right? But this hosting we are doing is just for testing purpose. How do I mean for testing purpose? It is testing purpose in the sense that we are only hosting it on our local machine, our local PC. Anything outside our local host, right? That project cannot be accessed. So now in a case whereby this project is going into production, right? These two files here, ASCII and WSGI, would now be responsible of building connection or communication of how Python web application and the server communicates. That is what they do. So we won't be working with them as such, right? So we won't be touching these files as such. So if we check this file, right? So let's say I want to VR inside this file. So if you check, you see some pre-built programs or code in them. So let's just check, right? So let's check. Can you see? So we have some programs, right, that had been what pre-built. So which you wouldn't be what messing with. So these are just to build the communication. So let's check what we also have inside the WSGI. So I'll also be VRing inside WSGI, right? So if you check, can you see? So we just have some pre-built what code in it. So that is WSGI for you. Now the next one is what settings, right? So these settings is to a very large extent we'll be working with, right? So this is where we can just change different settings and configurations, right? So let's say we added a new application which we'll be doing in the course of this session. So let's just say we added a new application. So we need to go inside that setting, right, to also add this new record inside a specific section inside the settings. So which you'll be seeing in a minute. So this is just basically to add what configuration, to change different settings and the likes. So relating to our what our project. So and lastly, we have URLs, right? The URLs. So what does this URLs does, right? So this is where we can set up like mapping for what? For certain URLs. So this is what we would be delving into basically in today's session, this URL. So we would try as much as possible to understand how this mapping communicates, right? So you want to understand like the conceptual framework of mapping, you want to understand the logic of how the mapping from here would communicate with, we would also be creating another mapping inside our app. So by the time we start app now, we will still be starting app projects. So how are this connection or communication established? So we'll be learning, right? But for now, just bear in mind that mapping is just what it's used, right, to set up certain URL connection, right? So that when a user goes to abc.com, right? So where should HTTP, I mentioned earlier that you would also be learning HTTP request and response, right? So the request is I open a browser and I type abc.com. That's a request. Now, HTTP is responsible to do some background assignments and check if this our project has been what hosted publicly, right? If it has been published. So it checks, is there anywhere I can find this what domain, right? So when that is found, it hands it over to a certain individual that picks it up and also do another background check to also confirm where is this, where should I raise this request to, So it also map it into one another URL that is also responsible for this mapping. So how all these are interconnected, we are going to learn all of them in today's session. So just bear in mind that that is what URL is basically. So it is not really complicated, right? So it's just to establish connection when a user is trying to access a specific address on the internet. So they would have everything in practical in a moment. So I want to believe I've been able to do justice to all of these files that were created while we ran the Django admin start project, and we named our project my project. Then when we check inside, we just found some files created by default, right? So these are what these files are basically. So now, having established this, right? So what we want to check is now we have created all of this. So and what we are doing is we said that we are building a web application. So an application that should be accessed on the internet by interacting with it using a what? Using like a client, like a browser, be it Opera, Chrome, Edge, and the likes, right? So now we've created what we need to create. We've created a project, right? Just a basic test project. Now let's check, let's confirm if we can access this our newly created project on the internet. So how do we test, right? So if you want to test, this would now take us to the next command I'll be introducing to us to check if everything we are doing is working fine or otherwise. But before we run a test, right, let's first have an experience or an idea of what the specific IP address, which would be what redirecting to our local hosts, would review or would output for us before we run a server, right? So what run server is would make sense in a moment. But let's first check, right, so that we can have a before and after experience of what this run server command is doing and what this project we just created is doing. So I would open a browser now, right? So let me open a browser. So in this browser, so let me just say, so in this browser, so I would open an incognito browser. So an incognito browser is just like open an in private browser. So in this in private browser, so I know I said before that for a test, right? So Django still give us the opportunity to always check and confirm every new key features and functionalities we are adding to our program. So but we can only access them locally, right? So, and the IP addresses, we can say 127.0. So as we can see, it's right displayed on the screen. So what 127 is it's an IP address, but this IP address is what your local machine address, right? So it's a default local mesh. It's a default address for every machine, right? It is referring back to your computer. That is what it means. But you want to access this using port 8000, right? So when I run this, so let me just run this and see what we have here. Can you see? So we have this site can't be reached. Why? Because it's like you 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 are sending a package to a non-existing address, right? So you called a dispatch delivery, right? So and hand over a package to the delivery guy and ask him to go and deliver it in a in a non-existing island. So what happens? So we just roam about, go and come back, and give you a feedback that I have searched and searched and searched. I can't find any place existing on this address. So that is basically what just happened now, right? So you might be wondering, however, we've created our project. Why can't we access it? Because we have not run a server that would keep running this server, that would now host this server for us to be able to access it. Now let's run the server now and see what the experience is. So then we go back to this. So I am happy to take question while I am explaining, right? So if you feel too fast or you would like more clarification on anything, so please just call my attention. So now, but for you to run server, you need to run server on this directory. So directory, you need to run server, you need to be on a path where you have this. Please look at my cursor. So if you see where I am annotating now, so there is a file I am hovering on, so which is manage.py. This manage.py, right? So I said I was going to explain it earlier. So it allows us to run our server. So that is what it does basically. Like the layman term or explanation for what manage.py is just what allowing us to run server, to to put our server on, like just pressing on, right? So then before you now run a server, you must be on the path where that directory is. So if you check at the moment, I am not, if I list, I can't find the manage.py directory here. So which means I need to go a step backward to where that file is, to where the folder rather, because it is a directory, before I am able to query or to send it the errand I want to send it, right? So if you check, I am currently on what? That part now, right? So since I'm on that part, so the command to do that is not far-fetched at all. So it's just basically as we used to execute our Python program. So for most of us that don't really use the VS Code editor as such, so you would agree with me that if you want to run any Python program, so what you do is just do Python, right? Manage, so which is the file. So you call the file, right? Python manage.py, then you say run server. So what are we saying here? What we are saying here is this new project we just created now, right? So don't forget, we would be seeing some changes on our browser because because beforehand, Python has pre-built features and functionalities, right? Which we just want to build on. So that is what we want to run now and see one of those pre-built features. So we have not started adding our own extensions or our own extensive features or our own customization into that project. But you still have an idea of what has been pre-built, right? So when I run this command now, so let's see what we have here. So can you see? Can you see? So now when you run a command like this, so if you check, you have an output, right? So in this output, we have something like, so what should be our concern basically is what we have, starting development server at, can you see? So it's stating here that we have starting development server at this IP address. So our development server is now running, right? Our development server is running. So now look at this warning we have here. So it is equally important to take note of this warning. So I have also mentioned it earlier. It says that this is a development server. Do not use it in production settings. So use a production. Can you see? I've also explained this before. So anything production, use WSGI and ASCII server instead. But for tests, we are good with this, right? So now, and every time you want to check a new feature or you want to verify if your server is running, so you want to leave it running, right? So currently it's running, right? As you can see it here, it's still running. So now let's go back to the browser and see what we have there. So now let me refresh. So let me just type it again. So I want to say 127 and run. So can you see what we have here now? So we have here displayed to us that the install worked successfully. Congratulations. So can we see? So we also have some pre-built features or some pre-built display, right? So which we can just interact with, like this one. You can check for the Django documentation if you want to read more on Django, right? So tutorial, Django community, blah blah blah. So, but basically, when we run that command, right? So we were able to what? To verify. Who is that again? So you might want to mute Victor. So we are able to what? To verify this basically, right? So now another thing we can also check is, so but before we check, so let me, okay, so we have not started an application yet. So you check that in a moment, right? So now I want to believe we can all appreciate the fact that we ran that server and successfully we can confirm from the back, from the browser, that what it has been, what it has been installed, and the browser is currently what run the server rather is currently what running. So which means anything we are building inside our project, we should be able to see it here, depending on how we have routed everything to display to our what users engaging or using the what web application. So now another way of accessing your local IP address is what? So if you don't want to use this IP address, right? So you can also do the same thing by saying local host. So it's still basically the same thing. So either you say local host or you use that number. Can you see? It's still the same thing. So that we can confirm it's still the same thing. So I'll create another incognito, right? So I'll just access local host and see what we have. Can you see? See, I have the same output. So it's either you use 127.0.0.1, then a colon. So 8,000 is just the ports you're accessing it from, right? So you have the same display, right, on your browser. So that is that on what? Starting and creating a what? A project in Django. Now that we have created this project, right? So now once you are done with your server, so you might want to what? To terminate the server from running. And to terminate your server, so you just basically press Control C on your keyboard. Can you see? So it has terminated. So when I try to access it, if I try to access it after termination, so it should return error, right? So can you see? So I have, oh, so this should just be a replication delay. So can you see? So it's having replication delay, but since I have terminated it, so it stops running, right? So now that we now understand or appreciate how to start a project, right, in Django. Now, what if we want to start interacting with Django? So by interaction, how do I mean? Okay, we also want to make some changes, right? So changes such as when a user visits local hosts, then the ports, then a user wants to go to a specific page, what should be displayed for the user? So what I mean is, okay, let me cite an example so that this can make sense. So let's say, which example can we use? So let's say I'm trying to check for an example of a site we can use so that this can make sense. Let me see if, okay, so let's say we want to use Microsoft, right? Microsoft.com. So if I go on Microsoft.com, look at what happens. Okay, let me close this 1 second, just a second. So I don't want to use the incognito anymore. 1 second, please. Okay, so I need to demonstrate this so that it can make a lot of sense. So I can say, okay, let me see if Gmail accepts the incognito, because there's something I want to drive at. So when we say gmail.com, right? So let's see what we have displayed. So can you see now? When I say gmail.com, it routes me to a what? To this page, right? It routes me to this page. Now, if you see, in addition to the gmail.com that I typed or entered on my browser, so I still have some what's added information here, right? So now what if I just say gmail.com/login? Okay, so was not found. I think let me see. Let me try that on my usual browser. So I don't want to open this because I already have my Gmail opened. But let's see. So let's just say gmail.com/login. Okay. So I guess there is no URL routing relating to that. So let's say Microsoft.com, right? So if you say Microsoft.com, so let's see what we have displayed for us on the screen. Um, this is taking longer than necessary. So, but I need to demonstrate this so that the routing and mapping can make sense. Let me say, okay, let's say google.com. So I'm trying to check if we can get this using Google. So we say google.com, right? So when we say google.com, right? So we have something display here. So let me now find something on Google. So let's say Django. So let me say, well, let's say we want to find Django on Google. So essentially, so what I'm trying to stress is um, each routing is performed by what? By the routing intelligence or routing logic, right? By routing logic. So by logic, what I mean is while you are using Django as a web framework, right? So there is when you start working on your applications, so your web browser does not limit its page to one. You have series of pages, right? You would have your home page, right? From your home page, when a user clicks on something like about, it redirects to the about page. So that redirection, right, and the routing are what has been what's done logically while building that application, right? That is why sometimes we say gmail.com, right? So it takes you to a page. Then we say gmail.com/admin. It takes you to another page, right? Or when you're on a browser, you say so.com. You click on something, so it takes you to another place and add an addendum to that what URL you've typed in your browser. So how are all this done in the backend is what we want to what extend or venture into now. So, and for us to do that, right, the first thing we need to do is to what? Is to create what we know as what? To start app. To start app. I mentioned earlier that you would have like what? A project directory containing like subdirectories. So one of such subdirectories is that is where you can now create some specific functionalities of what you want your project to be able to do, right? So now in this case, so just want to um have like you just want to update our browser page, which we have seen, right? That if we go to a specific URL, it should just display like a welcome or a greeting to a user, right? Or to just tell a user what the page is all about, just something to display instead of what we are saying, right? So now, how do we do this? One, and secondly, how do we do the mapping so that Django can now understand that this is what I should display when someone goes here. When someone visits here, this is what the person should see. So how are all these things like interlocked in the back end? So that is what we want to do now. So now to do that, right? So we want to go back into that um directory. So into that directory. So here is where we then create we want to start our application now, right? So now to start application, it's not far-fetched at all. So we just do Python, right? We want to do Python, then we use this manage.py again, right? So Python manage.py, then the command to start or to create the app folder is what? Start app, right? Then we want to give this a name. Right? We want to give it a name. So in our case, let's call it bookstore, right? So let's call this bookstore in our case. So just call it, you can call it anything actually. So but we are calling it what? Bookstore. So what we are just saying basically with this command is, okay, fine, Python, create or start an application inside our projects and name it bookstore. Then when I enter, so let's see what happens. So let me list. So can you see we have new directory added to our list, right? So which is what? Bookstore, right? So now let's enter the bookstore and see what it also has in it. So I would cd into bookstore now, right? So then I will list. So if you see here, just like its predecessor, the my projects directory we created earlier. So it also came with what? Rebuilt directories and files, right? So now this should all be making sense now. This should all be making sense now. I said it while I was introducing today's concept that Python also comes with a pre-built admin, right? So we don't need to build like an admin interface. It is pre-built, right? So can you see it now? So that admin interface is what we have next to init. We have explained init. So I'll be skipping init. So it's still the same thing, just for Python to recognize this as a what? As a Django to see it as a what? As a Python package, right? So then the admin is where we have all the pre-built programs that created this admin what interface for us. So we would also be seeing in a moment, right? So then we have apps. So these apps also, so this is where we also have some pre-built features or functions that would what make that are reusable to build what? A faster and more secure what? Web application. So next to that, we have another directory, which is what? Migrations. We have models, we have tests, and we have views, right? So for models is, I have emphasized on models earlier. So just for a quick recap, what model is or do or does is it is responsible. This is where we can write all our database logic. So this is where the Django like handle anything relating to database for us. So we don't need to manually define our data schema. So it just uses something known as what? ORM for this handling, and it's use it by what? Connecting it with what we know as what? There is something like a class, right? It's used like a class structure, like an object structure, so which we are familiar with. So this that will be doing something something dot something something to access a method in a class. So we can still remember. So accessing a method in a class. So this is abstraction again in play. If you remember our abstraction class, right? So here we won't be defining any class. But if you want to use some of this SQL that we are familiar with, like create table, show table, create database, and the likes, right? So we just interact or engage with all of this using class methods. We won't see any code, it won't be obvious, but this is abstraction in play, right? Also that we are what? Interfacing in Django. So that is what models is specifically. So next to model is what? Tests. So test also would help us to do something such as unit testing and other tests we want to what? Run in the course of what running our program. So this is another feature that Django also what help us to do. So we don't need to manually enter all the test cases while we were reviewing unit tests. You can all still remember, right? So it also helps us to build the structure, right? The fundamentals, the basis. So then next to it, we also have views, right? So these views basically is where most HTML codes are written. So by HTML, so basically most of what users interface with while browsing or while accessing a web page is what is the user interface, what they can see, right? What is being displayed. So this is where most of those logics would be. And also, most of the routing logic, the URL routing, would also be inside these views files, right? So now, in our case, so you just want to build a basic program into the server we have what installed earlier and which we have run, whereby if a user now visits a specific URL, right? So this is what we want them to see. This should be displayed on the screen, right? So how do we do that? So the first thing we want to do is to what? To first what? Start with our view file. So it is inside this view we want to program what we want users to see when they go to that specific URL, which will be seen after we've what fulfilled all righteousness. All right. So now let's enter inside the view. So as Sunday asked earlier, right? So this view also it also contains some pre-built programs, right? So we just add what we want to it, right? To make it work as we want, as per our what requirement or as per our what objective. So you can actually open this using any editor, right? You can open it using Sublime. You can open it using VS Code or any editor of your choice, right? So in my case, I'll be using this VI. So VI just basically like an a an inbuilt text editor that comes with Git Bash. So it comes with Git Bash, right? So then I'll say vi views.py, right? So if I enter, right? So can you see when I opened it, I can see a line of code there. So this line of code is, don't forget, in our module class, right? So all of these things are now becoming what usable or interactive, right? So in our module class or in our package class, so we learned all of this, how to import from one module into another module, right? So that is what they are doing here now. So we want to import render from this Django.shortcuts. So we should be needing, right, to in order to achieve our what end. Now, in addition to this, we will now add another what we also need. Don't forget, what we want to do is we want HTTP request and response to handle what will be displayed for our user. So when they want to access a specific web page, right? So and for this to work, we also need to import another module from what from this Django library. So what we'll be importing here is we just add to this. We say from, right, from Django. So you want to from Django.http, right? From Django.http, right? So we want to import HTTP response. So this just need to do, right? So you just want to import this. So I want to believe you are all familiar with all of this, right? So because if we don't import this, there would be an issue when Django is trying to route or interconnect our URL, right? So it needs to have this imported, then it can then use all of the what classes and methods, right? Inside this library, it's importing to perform the operation. So when I say it's pre-built, so all of these things that had been pre-built are inside this library we are what importing. So now what do we want to define? So just define something very basic, right? So we define a function. So this function is what to just display welcome. So don't forget we are working on bookstore, right? So you can just say something like welcome to my bookstore when the user wants to access a specific URL. So we want to call um this this function index, right? So let's say we call it index. Then don't forget this would take an argument, so which is request. So this request argument, we won't be using it at the moment, but we'll be needing it in our what future tutorial or classes, right? So but just know that anytime you are doing HTTP request, so you need to add this what request argument. Then we what enter. So what we just want to do is we are not doing something complex. So just return HTTP response, right? So that response should be what? We can say, welcome to my bookstore, right? It can be anything. Can be anything. Can be building like an e-commerce website. So welcome to my, then the e-commerce or the website or the company or the organization name, right? So in our case, so we just making it welcome to my what? To my bookstore. So and that is anything we need to do inside this words, inside this view. Now, how do we now map this to the URL? So what we have done is we've just written, right? No one would visit this page now and see this thing displayed. So we need to build the logic that will connect this to that URL. When a user visits, then this will be displayed. Again, this is what we want the user to see. But user needs to get to somewhere to see this, right? Then to build that connection, we need to what? Write a logic that will now connect them, that will connect anytime user visit that place, that will connect it to welcome to my bookstore page, right? So that is why we now need to what? To create a URL for our what? For our app program. Don't forget. So let me list again. By default, we don't have URLs file, right? We don't have it built or created by default when we run that start app command, right? So, but we still need to route inside these views now, inside these views. So when they check into that URL specifically, so we want this to display to them. So for that reason, so we need to now create what? A URL file. So which is very, very easy, right? So if you are not familiar with VI, so I'll be using normal command we use to create to create file, so which is touch. So I can just say touch URL s dot py. There will also be a dot py. When I enter, let me check now. So as you can see here, we now have what? A new file created named urls.py. So this is what we want to use to build the connection for what will be displayed and where it should be displayed. Again, what will be displayed and where it should be displayed. That's what we want to do now, right? So now let's now do the mapping, right? So the mapping is not far-fetched at all. It is very, very easy. So how do we do this mapping? So to call that view, to call it, so we need to map it to that URL we just created, right? So now I would open the URL now. So using my same URL VI. So if you are working with VS Code, so just open it on your text editor. It's still the same thing. So let me clear the screen first. So I'll say VI URLs, right? .py. So when I open this, so as you can see it here, so we also have something, one moment, less. Okay, so I have my URLs. One second. Let me check again via URLs. Okay, so what did I open before? I opened something before that showed me something. I guess I opened view, but I wasn't expecting the URLs to contain anything. Okay, that could be a misbehavior. So I wasn't expecting this to have anything before. So can you see it's an empty word file, right? So now for us to start this mapping, so we need to also import some modules, right? We need to import some modules. So one of the first modules we want to import is, so if you check, so now let's check. Let's go back some step to our project file. So if I say my project, right? My project. So in this my project, let me say ls. Then don't forget, we have another URLs in my project file. My project is the what? It's like the parents directory holding other what subdirectories. So, but this one, it came by default with this URLs, right? So now we also need some logic. We need like virtually the same logic inside this URLs file. So you just copy what we need, then we go and use it in the one we just created. So that's what we want to do basically. So I will now enter inside this one, right? So when I enter inside this one, so this is what I need. So I need that. The first thing I need is I need the post imported module, right? The admin contrib import admin. Then I also need the URL pattern. So this URL pattern is what I would now use to define how I want my own URL to be to be mapped, right? So let me copy. So I will copy everything, right? So and I will just make some modification. So since this is VI, so there's actually a command. So, but it is, I don't think this is our interest. So I wouldn't be delving much into it. So let me just select everything and copy. Okay. So I've copied it. Then I will now go into the one we created, right? So I need to leave this directory and enter inside the bookstore, right? Then inside the bookstore, I want to open the URLs file, right? So when I open this, then I can paste what I copied. Can you see I've pasted it here? But do we need it in this scope? No, just need some of it. So like here now, we don't need the from Django URLs import parts. Sorry, we need the Django URLs import part, but we don't need the Django import admin. Why? Because we are not building any mapping for admin page yet. So what we just want to build mapping for is our view logic or our view HTTP response we just created. So I can remove this one since I don't need it now, right? So I can remove it. So let me remove it. Okay, I've removed it. So another thing I now need is, don't forget, I want to map this I want to map this URL to that view file. So let me revisit the view file again so that I can make sense. Now, before I go further, so now see that both views and URLs are in the same directory. They must be in the same directory, right? So, or if they are not in the same directory, you should just know how to navigate, right? Using your imports and the likes. But in this case, they are in the same directory, right? So now, I now want to map this view. Let me VI inside the views. Or let me just let me cut views so I can see what is inside. Views.py. So as you can see here, so I have it displaying welcome to my bookstore, right? Now I want to map it to a specific URL, right? So that when they visit that URL, it shows them this. Then I will now say, so I need to import, this is where I now need to import this view inside my URL. Don't forget module importing. That's what we are doing basically. We are not doing anything different. So I also want to import the views, right? The views, everything I have inside these views, I want to bring it inside the what? Inside the URLs. And don't forget, while we were reviewing or learning module, one of the basic feature of module is to avoid repetition. It's enhance reusability of what? Of code. So in this case, I need everything inside this place, right? Do I still need to now come inside the URLs and start typing again? No, I don't need to start typing. I will just enter inside this URLs, right? .py. So now I will just do what? What I just need to do is to what? To import everything I have inside. And to import is not difficult. So don't forget, we say from, I said they are in the same directory, right? Since they are in the same directory, so you just say from dot. Dot mean take it from the same directory because they are sharing the same house. Take it from this same house that you are also in. That's why you say from dot. Unlike the first one here, this one is going to import from, because this one now, abstraction, we don't even have idea where this one is. That's why we need to what? Be what? Very granular here to say what from Django.urls, but this one we know where it is coming from. That's why we are saying what from this the same directory you are, then do what? Import views, right? Import views. Again, from the same directory, import views. So with this now, we have given control for URLs to now go and check inside view and take anything that is of its interest or that is of the logic we are about to what define now. So now we now want to define our what URL mapping and pattern. So don't forget we copied this, right? So we don't really need this pattern or mapping logic. So we need our own. So we can then just erase this. So having erased this, right? So we now want to say that for this, when they visit home, so for home, so these are the what? These are the like the arguments or the parameter for this part, right? So these are the things we just need to open. We need to input in this part. So you say what? When the user visits home, right? When they visit this home, so we add a comma. So when they visit this home, let me add the comma, right? What should happen? So we want to say that when they visit this home, now take them to, pay attention, please. When they visit this home, take them to view.index. So what is the meaning of this view.index? I will take a break here and show us what it means. So this is view.index. So this is view.index. So let's review view again. Let's review view again. So now when I cut views, can you see? I named the file views, but inside these views, what did I do? I created a function which I named index, right? So this is what I'm saying here, that when they visit home, can you see this part? I'm defining the part now. When they visit home, now I am giving it the path navigation, right? The parts. So I want you to take them to, I want you to go and check inside views. Then inside views, you might have series of variants of function inside view. But in my own case, take the index function. Take the what? Index function. So that is what we've done, basically. So then I want to add another comma, right? 1 second. So I will be adding another comma here. Okay. So then the next thing is what? So these are just what arguments required by these parts. So you now say what? You just want to name it. So you also give it a name. So what is this name? The name is just like give it a name to differentiate it from other application you might also be adding as functionalities in your program. So, but for this one, so that it can be unique to this, so we want to call this one index. So since the function name is what? Index. So I think it's safe to call it what? Index. So we say what? Index, right? So having called this index, then we have been able to map this URL pattern to what? To go and fetch the function or anything we have inside the index function, right? Anytime a user visits our what? Home page, anytime a user visits the home page of our what? Of our browser. That is what we've done here, basically. So I'll recap very quickly so that it can make more sense. So again, what we are doing is what? We are doing routing, mapping, or as you might want to call it, right? So don't forget inside our views. So the first thing we need to do is to what? To import some modules. So the first module we need is what? Inside the library, sound library, inside the Django module. So we import from Django.urls, we import parts, right? So we also said from the same directory we are, import views. Now we need to define the URL pattern. What is the logic? How should it carry out this assignment? We want to send it. So the assignment is what? When the user visits home, take them to, now go and check inside views. inside the views file. When you enter inside the views files, check if you can see any function named index. So if you can see any function named index, it means that when they visit this page, anything that is being what defined or scripted in that index function is what I want you to show the user. Then we also need to give it a name. So in this case, we call it what? Index. Now, is it over here? Are we good now? Can we just go and check the browser and go to this part? Are we going to see, welcome to my bookstore on the browser page since we have defined the logic? The answer is a what? A big no. A big no, because before the HTTP requests and response get to where our application is, something has to what? Give it a direction. Again, before, don't forget, our browser is the what? Django is also handling HTTP request and response. I've explained that earlier. So before it gets to this place, I want to display to the user, right? Something has to point it to here that, okay, fine, what you are looking for, go and check inside this room. Okay, now, for example, you have like a big office building, right? You have a big office building, an office that is restricted. Now, in this office, Clement works in this office. So you as a visitor, you want to see Clement. You can't just barge in and go and fetch Clement. Nope, it's impossible. So you need to follow some what procedure or protocol, be it meeting a security, then telling the security who you want to see, or meeting a receptionist, then telling that receptionist who you want to see. Then the receptionist now points you or fetches Clement for you, right? So that is the same logic we are doing here. Now we know where we are going. We know where Clement is, right? But we can't just go and bring out Clement. So something has to tell us that, okay, fine, go to room 13. Then you will find Clement in room what? 13. So that is what we want to do now. Then how do we achieve this? We can achieve this by now also adding this mapping to our project URLs. You remember our project URLs, right? So now let's go to the project URLs. So this is the project URLs is just like a representation of the what? The receptionist or the security man, right? So now let's go to where that one is. So don't forget, so it's not in this directory, so we need to go a step backward. Let's see if it is here. It is here. So we need to enter inside that my project. So we say cd my project, right? Cd my project. So let me clear the screen. So let's list. So cd my project. So can you see now? So now this is the URLs. It's like a global URL. So because the HTTP will be taking like the similar and arrays of requests. It is because we are building a simple application. If it is like a complex application that the only page is not where we want to say welcome to my bookstore, we would also have another page that, okay, fine, what would you like to get from us today? So when you click on, okay, fine, I want to purchase so items, right? It's also take you to another place. Okay, fine. So you see a list of the items, then you select, takes you to another page. So now all this routing, right? Before they can be reached, they must first visit the receptionist. In this case, the global project URLs. It's now the global URLs, this global project URLs, right? That will now tell the visitor that, okay, fine, this page you are accessing, you can find it here, right? So now let's now enter inside the URLs, right? .py. So when we enter inside it, can we see we have some pre-built programs here, right? But our own interest is now by default, there is something called paths. This admin now. So by default, there is one admin here. So which means in our website now, if we go to that local host we tested initially, right, earlier. So if you now say that local host, then the colon, then the ports 8000 slash admin. If we do slash admin, right, it will take us to one admin page. it is this admin page. This is where that channel is coming from. That admin page that it takes you to, this is the routing, right? We are going to check that in a minute. This is the routing, but it is Django that is handling this one for us. So we are not doing this. That is why it came pre-built. But our own case, we want to add that view that we know that we coded ourselves, we scripted it ourselves, right? So we need to now manually come here and add it to this part as another part. So I can now tell any visitor that this place you are looking for, go and check here, right? Then when it check inside where this one pointed to, then it now connects with the don't forget the URLs we created inside our what app projects, inside our bookstore projects, right? So it connects with it, and that one also what executes anything we have defined in the mapping and display to the screen what the user is supposed to what to see. Then before we do this, before we add it, so there is another there's another module we need to also what import. So one of the modules we need is we need this Django.urls import part. Then we also need another module which is what include, because it is this include that we'll be calling to include any other routing that we are creating inside our what application project. So then we say what parts, then we add a comma. So we don't need to say from Django. We are still importing it from the same module Django.urls, right? So the method we want to import now is what include. So you just say include, right? So if you can still recall, so this is one of the what approaches of importing. If you want to import more than one method, right, or module, so you can use this pattern. So just import part, comma, the other one, comma. You can import as much as possible, right? So we do this, then we can now come here. So after we've done this, then we can come here. Don't forget, we now want to add our own pattern. So our own pattern in our own case is what? Our own case is um 1 second. Our own case is the bookstore, right? So the bookstore. So now let's pay close attention here, please. So since we are adding for the bookstore, so this is where we now define that when the user access this URL path, then we want to point it to this URL, right? So we can now say that here, since these are global URL, so we check this pattern, right? So let me now input what we need here. So here we can say parts, right? So now we want to call our own part books. So which means anytime the user now type on the browser. So what we are saying here is anytime the user types on the browser, the local hosts :8000/book, right? /book. So what should happen? So include, then point them to, now we now say what? Don't forget our app name. We call it what? Books, right? So we say books underscore, which we name it underscore store dot URLs. You remember our URLs that we created? Then we close. Again, what we are saying here is, no, we don't forget our comma. What we are saying here is when we have defined, we have defined this logic, the logic of this bookstore URLs. So this is where we imported the view and connect view to the index function. So we need to now come into the what? The parent project file that is housing our app file, right? So I now tell this one that this is now the receptionist that, okay, fine. In this case, this is book, right? This when they want to access local hosts or anything we call our domain, right? Dot anything. But if it's now /books or /book, right? So let's say /books. So if it's /books, if it's /books, right? So include, point them to what? Bookstore.urls. What is bookstore.urls? Now we are done with it. Let's go and confirm what bookstore.urls is. So if you check now, right? So let's go back here. Let's enter. So now bookstore, let's see the inside bookstore, right? So let's ls. So now, can you see bookstore.urls? Point them to this place. What is inside urls? Now let's see what we have inside urls. What do we have? Our what? Our mapping that we've defined. So we now also tell URLs that, okay, fine, no, after all our importation, right? Now, before you display for them, now when they go to that home, which is the books that we have stated, right? So now go and check inside views.index, right? So now let's now see what we have inside view.index. So now let's cut view.index again. Views dot, sorry, we want to cut view. So now let's see what we have inside index. So can you see? So now when they now click here, right? After this, my project URLs directs them to this one, right? So this one will now also say, okay, fine, no, go and display what you have inside the index function. So if you now check what we have inside the index function is what? Welcome to my bookstore. That is when a user would now say, welcome to my bookstore, display it on the screen, right? So this is not all, right? So there are still some basic configuration we need to do so that the next step is just to what? To register our projects. So why do we need to register our project? That it can be included. So when other tools are what run. So by doing this, it's not something difficult. So we just need to register one file, one part inside our settings. So don't forget we have a settings, right? So we have a settings in our what? In our project file. So let me enter inside the
Sorry,
project
Ibrahim,
file.
to just ask a question.
Okay, go
This
ahead, please.
sorry, this our views file. I don't know for some reason when I use that return HTTP response, VS Code is flagging that HTTP response. I don't know why.
You said what?
VS Code, like it's flagging HTTP response on my own file, and I don't know why it's flagging it. That's
VS Code.
return. Yes.
Um, okay. So, okay, you have return HTTP response, right? And it's flagging it.
Mm.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you want to share that in the chat so that I can review very quickly? Drop in the chat, please. Let me review
Okay.
very
Don't worry.
quickly.
After the tutorial, I'll send it to you.
Okay, okay, okay. So you can just leave it for the section of question and answer. Okay, so now um what we want to do now is so we just want to just it's just like fulfilling requirements, right? So we've done with our routing. So we've done all our routing, all our logic, all our mapping. So we've done with that. So now, but what we just the new app we just created, right? So we want to go and add it inside our settings, right? So that is why we need to now go to my project, which contains the settings, right? So we have the settings.py, right? So you enter inside the settings.py, right? So in this case, you now go to where we have installed apps. Can you see? So there are some apps that are can pre-installed. So this is one of the words, one of the um like benefits, right? One of the benefits of what using Django. So can you see? So we have some features like that has been what pre-built. So if you see we have inside this installed apps, so some had come by default. So you have Django.contrib.admin. So we have one that also handles authentication. So we have one that handles messages, sessions. So if you check on that, we also have some other system config, right? So all this, so can you see? So you also have one for database, you have for password validations. You know, I said validators. I said earlier that it's like handles a lot of things that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. So we just need to do is just to what? To build on it. So that's what we are doing now. So we want to build on this. So we want to add this our own new application to the list of installed apps, right? So now we just come here. So you just come here and what? Enter, right? So just want to add it here. We say enter, then we type it there. So in our case, you can say bookstore, book underscore score, store, right? Store. Then what do we call it? Then we say dot apps. So these are just basic convention, right? So you don't need to really memorize. So you can just copy and paste. So when you need them, dot store config, right? So then we add our comma. So again, we have what we have now added or registered our application. So you say book underscore score dot apps dot book store config, right? So we are done. This is the only thing we need to do, right? So we can just close the file when we are done, right? So let me clear the screen. Now we are almost done with our what project file. So we're almost done with our project file. So all you just need to do now is okay, fine. No. So what we want to do now is we want to migrate all our changes, right? So now to migrate all our changes, so you just run a command. All the changes we've made, we say manage Python manage dot py, right? Then make migrations. So when we run this, so this would load, right? They should load, then give us an output. Okay. Oh. So here we got an error. Why? Because I am running this inside a wrong directory. So because I am invoking the manage.py and I am not currently in the directory where the manage.py is. So I need to go backward. So I am currently there now. Then I will run the command again. So let me run the command again and see what we have here. Okay, so it says that there are no changes, which is fine, right? So if there was an error, it would have reported that for us. So now the next thing you want to run is you also want to run another command for the migration. So you say python manage.py. Then this one is just basically migrate, right? So let's run this too. So wow, voila. So we have everything checked successfully, right? So now that we are done with this, what we need to do now is, okay, fine, all of this we've done. We need to check if they are all meeting our requirements or not. And don't forget, before you see anything, you need to keep your server running. Your local Python is providing like a test environment for us to check if our changes are what are replicating or otherwise. So now we need to now run our server now. So now let's run our server. We use the same thing we've used before now. So we say Python manage .py, right? Then run server. So when we run this, our server should be up. Okay, so again, as a reminder, note this is a development server, so we don't need it for what production. So then it's stating that, okay, fine, we can now go to this IP address and go and check what we have here. So now let's check now. So I'll go to that browser again. Okay, so I'll come to this browser again. So let's go use another incognito, right? So we want to come to that local, this again. So let me run it. So can you see what we have now? We are getting an error. Why are we getting this error? We are getting this error because we have modified the routing, right? So in our own case, what we scripted was when they now want to access this home page, which is what /books, we should display this one for them, right? So it's expecting us to now add that routing there, the books. Don't forget. So we have it. We have two registered mapping, books and admin. Admin is pre-built. You would also check what we have in admin, but our own case is what books. So you can just say what books because what we define is what books. So now let's hit enter. So what do you have on the screen? Welcome to my book store. So this is how everything now works. Now let's now assume we've now built a complex or a sophisticated web application, right, that we can interact with or that our user can interact with. So an interactive web page would be something that when I click on it, could be that if I just click, okay, welcome to my bookstore, how can we be of help to you today? So okay, fine. That could also be an hyperlink. An hyperlink is what you click, it takes you to another web page. It redirects you to another web page. So if I click on that, it should also take me to somewhere else, right? So, but in this case, we are just building like a static website, right? It is not really interactive, just for what basic program. But we can confirm that everything we did, the routing, the mapping, is working as expected. Now let's check what we have in what when we want to check admin. So let's say we want to go to admin now. So you see this. Let's see what we have here. So can you see? So we didn't define anything like this, but to an extent, this admin still have like what? A friendly display. This one still have like what? A friendly display, like Django administration. So it's asking us for what username, but this one would not it is not interactive because we have not defined any logic to it. So let's try and check if we can sign in. So I'll just say Ibrahim, right? So let me just enter anything as password, right? So now look at it. It's even concealing the password. And we didn't like write anything regarding to that. So these are what part of the pre-built security measure. So that we don't need to what reinvent the wheel, right? We don't need to, it's like what it promotes code reusability. Writing clean code. So let's try and log in. So we should get an error because we didn't map it to anywhere. So can you see it's even saying enter the correct username and password for a staff account. So all this is what we would now build upon. So we want to have like an admin page that will be managing websites and the likes or any other specifications, right? So we can then do that by creating sub applications inside our what grand project application. So that is that basically. So for a quick recap, before I start to take in questions, right? So our server is still running. So if you want to terminate it, so you just simply press Ctrl C, right? So it terminates the server, right? So now for a quick recap, so we are able to learn what Django is as a web framework. Again, so it is just basically a pre-built, it has some pre-built functions, right? Tools, right? That we can just leverage upon without having to what to define or without having to code everything from scratch, right? So with that, it is like a building a house. So using a ready-made foundations like walls, like wirings, all these are frameworks like plumbing. So these are what exists, right? So all we just need to do is just what to just do some finishing, how you want it to look, the aesthetic, the design, and the likes, right? So it is the same thing as what a raw Python. It is written for us to just build upon, right? So now with it, there are a lot of things we don't need to what to do repeatedly. Remember the convention of do not repeat yourself, right? We don't need to build from scratch, authentication or login, the database handling, file handling, admin dashboard, and a host of others, right? So then the next thing, after understanding what it is as a web framework, is now what, how do we start using it? Before you use it, you need two requirements. The first one is what? You must have Python installed on your PC, right? Or on the environment you are trying to build your project on. And also, in addition to having Python, so you also need to install the Django, right? So I also said that you can actually use this option of virtual environment, right? If you don't want to build it on your local environment where where your other Python projects are, right? So, but it's what's optional. It is not mandatory. So, which you can basically just run the command Python -m venv, then you give it a project name. So it creates a virtual environment for you. Then after it creates a virtual environment, you need to activate that virtual environment. So To activate it, it's dependent on the operating system you are using. There's a command for it if you are using Mac, and there's a different command for what Windows, right? So after you activate, it takes you to that virtual environment, and anything you are doing would be on that virtual environment. It will just like creating like a new a new working environment for you, right? So other than that, so you are good. So the next thing you just need to do is to like test run if Python has been installed. Use the pip list to check all the installed packages. If it is not listed, if you want to install it, so you can do pip install django, right? So what should be installed. Then afterward, you can interact with it by checking pip-admin to see. So it gives you a list of sub commands that you can start working with. So then you want to start what? Building your project, which would now lead you to creating a what? A project file. And when you create a project file, right? So what you just need to do is to what? To just run the command, right? Django-admin, start project, then you give your project a name. In our case, we called it my project, right? So as we can see here, so that is my project that was created. And together with the my project, we also have another directory created, which is manage.py. So which is basically for what's running our server, right? Interacting with our server, right? So and inside the my project, we have some sub files and directories created by default, so which we have reviewed and understand them, right? So amongst them is we have the settings.py, we have the url.py, which I believe you now understand what they stand for and how you can use them. So after all of this, we tested to see if our server is up and running, which we confirmed it to be running. Then we want to start making changes on the server, right? So we then start our what application. When you want to use application is just basically like having um defining it's like when you have a grand project, this is what you want your website to do, but there should be some functionalities, right? So you need to define them in specifics. Okay, now in this app, this is what I want you to do. In this app, this is what I want you to do. So you need to define all of this inside your project um, directory. So which we did, and to do that, you just use that command python-m, then start app, then your app name, so which we called bookstore. Then also that was also created with some default files and directories, right? Which we reviewed. So amongst them, we have the views, which we worked with today, the URLs, which we also work with today, and what a host of others. So after that, we also checked how to write a program. So basically that views, right? So it contains most times or majorly or primarily like HTML code. So like for the front end developers, so let's say like we are working in a team in a tech team, right? In a tech team, so we are building a projects, right? A production project. So before it reaches we publishing it, right, publicly. So there will be like a team work between the back end and the front end. So that is what basically what we will be collecting from the front end guys. So and be what building logic, right? Being Python backend developers, right? So we'll be using that view to build logic, because which is really I will be defining most of these functions or classes, right? So that okay, fine, I want to define this function, I want to define this class, this is what I want you to do. So and we have a basic what definition, a basic function for that we just want to display something to the screen when that's URL or that navigation part is being accessed. So then afterward, we also build connection, right? So we built a connection, we created a URL.py file. So in this file, we are able to connect the view and the URL together. Then before you get to URL and view, you need to what there will be a gatekeeper standing in front of the gates, right? So that was when we had to now revisit the URL inside our grand projects directory. Then also connect it back to the URL inside our sub app directory to build that connection. So then we saw all of this in play while we would completed the project and run our server again. So that is basically what Django is and what it can do for us, right, as developer. So it helps us to a very large extent to avoid building most of these functionalities, most of these logics from the scratch. Imagine you having to write SQL, all right? So most of in our next section, so okay, let me show us. So let me show us in this. Okay, let me go into that bookstore. So inside that bookstore, can you see there is another file here called models? If you see it, there's another file here called models. So this models is responsible for anything MySQL handling, right? It's responsible for anything MySQL handling. So we'll just be doing it the same way we are importing most of those modules. So when we import most of those modules that had been predefined or pre-programmed, right? So it will just give it some basic commands depending on the logic of SQL that we want or constraints that we want. So when we give it all those tips, just tips, do this, do that, it just it's perform or carry out those execution for us. So without having to say create create table, the table name, then starts. All of this will be what we just give it little information it needs, right? Then it's perform everything at a large scale. So in our next session, today we've been able to cover the URLs and the views. So the next session will be what covering or delving into models, right? So we'd also talk about migrations. And there's also one important thing we also need to check, which is what the templates, right? So templates, so we'll also be checking templates. So again, it's just built, Django is built on MTV architecture. The M is for the model, which is um the the logical database side, right? Which views is where we perform like the logical mapping and the likes. So we also have templates, so where we can have something displayed. So more of the views, right? So we have that also. So we'll be venturing into all of this in our next session. So with this would bring today's session officially to an end. Before we would proceed to take questions and and clarify if need be everything we've been able to address in the past 2 hours or thereabouts. So thank you all for staying till this minute, so that I will be ending the recording to avoid this being unnecessarily longer than this. Then we can start taking question and see how far we can do that. We take as many questions as we can. So 1 second, please. So while I just end this.